Welcome to Reality, Relationships, and the Red Pill with Paul Elam and Tom Golden. Today we'll be talking about family of origin. Let's see where we go.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am Paul Elam with A Voice for Men, sitting as always with Mr. Tom Golden of menaregood.com. Hey, Tom, how you doing, bud?
Paul, I'm doing good. It's good to see you.
Good to be seen. Well, let's see. Family of origin, otherwise known in some circles as FOO, F-O-O, your family of origin. And family of origin issues are what we're going to be talking about today, namely how to get the poo out of your FOO. And we have all had a little bit of poo in our FOO at some point or another. And it actually is quite a serious subject that affects the way we live our lives, our level of happiness, our level of adjustment, how we function in the world. It's very important. So Tom and I wanted to do probably what looks to be a series on this because it is a big, big topic. And I thought maybe, Tom, we could start with you giving us a little bit of an overview of family systems.
I'd be happy to, at least, for our purposes tonight. I think the first key word is equilibrium. Just equilibrium, because within a family system, the whole key is that everyone is seeking a certain equilibrium. Everyone's trying to seek stable space. And it's in that seeking of a stable space that things go haywire. But we need to keep in mind that really is underneath it all, is this equilibrium thing. I'll never forget John Bradshaw giving his workshops. And he had this mobile,
Yeah.
And every time he'd make a point, he'd pull that mobile. He'd pull one part of it. And of course, the mobile would dance up and down. And that is what we're talking about. In family dynamics, when one person is pulled on that mobile, everyone else is impacted. So it's like this dynamic, this seeking of equilibrium gets played out in a mobile of different people relating to each other based on how much equilibrium they have or how much they need. And where would you go with that, Paul? What else would you say?
Well, I think that's an important point because one of the things and I agree, I remember his series on the family was one of the most powerful series of lectures I've ever seen in my life.
Woke me up, boy.
Me too. As a matter of fact, it's one of those sort of like my red pill moment.
Yes.
Discovering red pill philosophy.
Yes.
Discovering John Bradshaw, his work on the family of origin.
Fantastic stuff.
As much as an amazing turnaround. And the benefit of using that mobile, and as you can tell, you could, like a baby's mobile, you touch one piece, all the other pieces are affected by it. It helped me see that family systems, you view the family as a system, as an organism in and of itself, that it's the gestalt is more than the sum of its parts. You have something bigger than just the individuals in it. And once you understand how that operates, you begin to understand your own family in a much more comprehensive, valuable way than you ever would just running around analyzing every individual in the family.
Right.
It's a much bigger, better picture. I'll give you an example of how this works. And we're going to be talking in a few minutes about family roles, whether you're the family hero, the scapegoat, the lost child, the mascot, the chief enabler, the primary addict, alcoholic, whatever that we're going to be using for that model. Is that, take scapegoat, for instance. You have a child that acts out and says and points at what nobody else in the family will talk about. That's generally what a scapegoat is. He's saying, hey, all this stuff you're talking, it's all bullshit. And I'm going to show you, how things really are. And of course, the family doesn't like that because it throws the system out of balance. They need a scapegoat, somebody to blame for the dysfunction in the family. Well, at some point in life, many scapegoats, especially the ones that find some help, will leave the family and say, no, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of your blame. I've had enough of your shame. I'm going to go live my life and I don't need this anymore. Well, guess what happens in the family? They elect another scapegoat.
Absolutely.
They will turn the hero child into a scapegoat. They'll turn the lost child into a scapegoat. But somebody in that family is going to end up getting all the blame because the role of scapegoat, just like all roles in family, is about the needs of the system. It's not about who that individual is.
And it's very fluid. It's very fluid, so that if one scapegoat disappears, all of a sudden the next one's going to pop up. And boys and girls, if that's you, look out. The scapegoat role is just, in my mind, is just one of the most difficult and the most vexing and the most traumatic for people, because people just.
Why don't we talk about that a little bit in talking about roles, which you can't talk about family systems without talking about family roles. I mean,
Yep.
it's an integral part of the subject.
Yes.
And the scapegoat is a really good role to talk about in that respect, because it sort of gives you insights into the other roles in the family when you have a scapegoat. So what we're talking about primarily is that you have the marital dyad. And on some level, all marital dyads have some level of dysfunction in them. I mean, it's impossible to be perfectly healthy or perfectly balanced. We're just not, wired that way. And what happens is that creates friction between the two. Maybe one parent can't handle it, and you can have everything from just mild workaholism, an absence from the family, all the way to full-blown addictions, to really, really horrific, terrible stuff, incest, drug addiction, anything you can think of. And then you have an enabler on the other side of that in most cases. And now the classic model has always been that the husband was the identified problem and the wife was the chief enabler. Whenever you study this stuff in college, you see these roles portrayed as the enabler, the codependent one is the woman, and the bad one is, of course, the man. And
of course,
it makes perfect sense. Absolutely, because we all know that women are totally functional, and
yes,
and were it not for this primary addict or primary dysfunctional person, the woman would be, problem-free and totally functional. Of course, that's bullshit. But what happens is the friction that's created for that is something that neither the husband or wife can deal with. And then you start seeing this get played out and acted out among the children. So you've got those two primary at the top in the dyad, and then you have different roles. You have the hero child, which is typically, and as Tom said, this is fluid. Typically, this is the firstborn. The firstborn, and their role in the family is to get everybody to perform well, be the captain of the football team, make straight A's in school, so that nobody looks at how fucked up the parents are. They can just point to the kid and say, see, there's our family. That's what our family produces.
Our representative.
Of course. And of course, this kid may be miserable and depressed.
Yes.
And totally out of touch with himself or herself, because they are trying to pursue this path of giving the family dignity and giving the family a sense of honor and a way to hold their head up. Then you have another child, which may break the tension in the family with humor. And it's called a family mascot. And family mascots frequently turn out to be comedians. I mean, you find in the history of family, there were class clowns. And class clown, that clownish role, that is a family role from a dysfunctional role, from a dysfunctional family. And of course, they make everybody laugh. That's how they ease tension in the family, is by making everybody laugh. And of course, you read later on in life, people like Freddie Prinze and Robin Williams and other comedians end up killing themselves because, again, they're living a role. They're not living their real existence in life. Their whole purpose is to try to ease this terrible tension that's in the family.
Yeah.
And
they're usually the youngest too, right?
I don't know.
That's been my experience.
And mine is maybe a little different. Frequently the youngest. A lot of times I found that scapegoats are the youngest. My family. I was a scapegoat and was the youngest, but that may just be my bias then. It may be that that mascots are more tend to be the youngest. And anyway, moving on, then you've got what we'll call the lost child. And this is a child many will identify with. This is a child with no needs.
Well, they disappear anyway.
Yeah, they disappear. And I'll use this in my family as an example. I remember growing up, every year, of course, we did school shopping for school. And everybody got their new clothes for school every August. And we'd be ready for September to go back to school. And my mother one day was sitting in the living room crying. And I asked her what was wrong. And she had gone and made lists of what everybody said they wanted, and except for my brother. She forgot to shop for him.
Oh.
That's how successfully he disappeared.
Yeah, that's pretty clever.
And these are people that grow up that you find they're more isolative. They say, I don't need this shit. I don't need people. And it's a sad role. It's a terrible, terrible role to be in, to have to disappear, because what the lost child typically sees is that the family is so consumed with the hero, the scapegoat, other children, and the marriage, there's just no space and time for them. So they withdraw and they withdraw and they have no needs. And then finally, I mean, and there's people that claim there's 15, 20 different roles and more. I don't know about that. I was just trying myself to stick with the basics. And finally, there's the scapegoat, the one who acts out, who gets in trouble, who is going to get arrested at some point, will get in trouble at school, get in fights, do drugs, all kinds of other problems. And what you see in them is someone who is literally acting out everything that's going on in the family that nobody's talking about, because in dysfunctional families, nobody's allowed to talk.
Yes, and the scapegoat swallows it. You know, they walk around, they've swallowed the stuff, and it's heavy. You know, it's very, very difficult. It's a hard role.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean,
geez. You know, I've worked with a lot of people who've been scapegoats in families, and you know, they know that their job, I mean, it's not a conscious knowing, but it's just an automatic being in the family is that they're supposed to take stuff on, you know, and that it is their fault. I mean, there's this huge sense of guilt and grief and shame that they end up swallowing. And it's a tremendous burden, because usually the scapegoat feels like they're the problem. I mean, they're sure that they're the problem because their whole family's told them they're the problem. I mean, everyone has said, well, you're the problem. If it weren't for you, everything would be blah, 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 blah. And so they walk around day in and day out with this burden of feeling like they are the problem. I mean, wow, that's a very, very difficult role for people to play. And, you know, of course, scapegoats and none of these roles, people feel like it's a role. I mean, they feel like this is them. This is me. This is the way I do things. This is the way I roll. And when you roll by taking on problems from someone else, that's a very difficult spot. And, you know, these problems that people have, like if the parents have an alcoholic or they're fighting or whatever, this stuff gets transferred in the air. It's fluid. Have you ever walked up to someone and stood next to them for a while and walked away and felt a little funny, you know, something different? In fact, there's this great grief ritual. There's an indigenous tribe where the women will be keening and wailing, like screaming and crying and wailing in public, right? The men will go up and stand next to them in order to try and get their own grief resonating. Isn't that fascinating? But they know that just by standing next to someone, they can get this stuff going. And it's the same thing happens in families. You know, you don't have to have even someone talk to you. You can pick this stuff up very, very stealth. I mean, it's just hanging there in the air. And we can just pick this up and it becomes a part of us unless we can breathe it out and get rid of it, you know?
I think that's precisely what Bradshaw meant by the tipping of one element of the mobile.
Yes.
Is a transference of everything. Another thing Bradshaw said in that lecture series, again, a very profound series, was that there's no secrets. in families.
There shouldn't be secrets, but
Shouldn't be secrets, and people try to keep secrets. But the tension from those secrets, everybody knows about. Everybody knows there's something
yeah, I think one of the things he said was your family's only as sick as its secrets.
Yep.
You can kind of gauge the health of a family based on who's not saying what to whom,
Yeah. For instance, if you come from a family and you don't know anything about any of your grandparents or great grandparents or extended family, if there's this rigid boundary around the family where we don't talk about anything that's significant, we talk about work, and we talk about sports, and we talk about all these more or less superficial items, but everything else is dark and cloaked in mystery. That's a profoundly dysfunctional family that cannot communicate.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And the other thing, Paul, that I think is really important is that some of this stuff that we take on in our family is from parents or maybe other siblings, but it's from their own history, and it's from they have inherited that from their parents or their parents' parents or their parents' parents' parents. I think the Bible says something like the sins of the father are passed on 7 generations. And I've thought about this, and I think that what they're saying is that we tend to pass on our unfinished business to our kids, and then they pass it on to their kids. And I'm telling you, it's fascinating when you're working with people in therapy, when the parent really owns something and figures it out and gets feeling good about it. They come back the next week and they say, wow, you know what? My kids are so much better now. It's like, oh, really? How about that? And it's because once they heal, once they take care of their own crap, things around them start to heal, because they're not passing that stuff down anymore. So this stuff can be very subtle. It can be very difficult. And, it takes a good mind to try and understand what's happening within the family. And it's great to have an objective party kind of to help you sort things out, because it gets confusing and it gets very difficult. And like I said, we tend to think this is us and this is reality. I mean, we don't think of it as a role. We don't think of the family as being a dynamic proposition. We think of it as being just our reality. This is what's happening. And so that makes it even harder than to break into the stuff that's going on and to own what is ours and not own the crap that's not.
And that is quite a formidable task.
Oh, boy.
To sort out what's me, what's this role.
Yeah.
And you can find yourself, as many people do, in your 40s and 50s, having asked, who am I?
Yes.
And that is daunting, to say the least.
It's a difficult task.
But it is doable.
It's
just
doable.
like Tom said, the sins of the father are visited 7 generations. The baggage that your great-grandparents had got transferred to your grandparents, to your parents, and now you're walking around with this stuff inside of you. But guess what? Healing can be passed down to generations.
Exactly.
To generation. When one person wakes up and says, you know what? My great-grandfather beat the hell out of my grandfather, who beat the hell out of my father, who beat the hell out of me. I'm not going to beat the hell out of my son.
Yeah.
That's not who I'm going to be.
Yes.
That also gets passed down from generation.
That's exactly right.
And
you can break that cycle, boom, right there. And if you do, you'll notice immediately. I mean, when you break it in your mind's eye, you'll notice immediately that everything around you changes.
I'm reminded of what Aaron Pitsey has tried to tell the world for 50 years when the idiot feminists came out with the Duluth model that domestic violence is an extension of patriarchy and patriarchal power into the home, and that men are just exercising their patriarchal rights by beating their wives, which is just, I think, the dumbest theory I've ever heard in my life. It's hard for me to imagine how they came up with that and say, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. No, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
And she points out multi-generational. Every time you hear Aaron Pitsey talk about family violence and partner violence or violence on children, you hear her use the term multi-generational. It is passed down. from family member to family member over generations. That's where a lot of our violence comes from, and it's aggravated by things that are circumstantial, like education, drug abuse, depression, mental health issues, a lot of other things. But the fact of the matter is, the core of the problem is a family problem. And that's why we're trying to have this discussion today. And I want to add this, and I think it's important to say this. I found over, going to school and studying this stuff for so many years and trying to become familiar with it, that there is a lot of valuable benefit in a lot of psychological theories. And we have to call them theories because this is a discipline. It's not a science. But there's still great value in there's great value in understanding family systems. It's a powerful, powerful thing in your life to understand family systems and to act on the good information and to get yourself out of a role.
Yes.
It's also been served up by the psychological establishment in a real crappy way to men. And I think ultimately a crappy way to women. It's why, you hear men, I would never go to a therapist. And who's going to blame them in their right mind?
Blame them a bit.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I don't blame them at all. And it's really sad because the information, the basic information, if you don't taint it with misandry and with bullshit meant to wrap it all in a pink ribbon so women will spend money on it. If you don't do all that stuff, you've got real valuable information. And that gives me, and it's why I value Tom so much, this gives me a sense of purpose in life, that we can try to carry this information to men in ways that they can actually benefit from it, which happens to come with giving a fuck.
Yes, because it can be very helpful. It can be life-changing. In fact, if you've been red-pilled, dealing with your family of origin stuff will make that red pill a lot redder.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very powerful stuff because you're on your own. Just like kind of the red pill, it gives you a sense of independence. Like, I'm not in this rat race anymore in the same kind of way. And man, dealing with your family of origin stuff and really being able to detach and love yourself for what's happening. That's just, the pill gets a lot redder. It's worth it. So worth it.
And this stuff, I see it as universal truths. I think when you study this stuff, the reason it resonates with so many people, especially if they can get it in an unbiased, fair way, it resonates to the core with people. It's like I was talking about and Tom had the same experience when I saw that series on the family by Bradshaw. It was earth-shaking. It was just literally rattled the ground underneath my feet.
Yes.
That powerful. And it does resonate in that way, and it can be incredibly helpful, but we got to be able to talk about it in ways that I think are directed at deepening the hue of that red pill.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
And I'm reminded, once you brought up in one of our talks, I forget if it was one of these that we did or just me and you chewing the fat, but you brought up a piece of scripture, Tom, that said that Christ had said, and again, full disclosure, I'm an atheist, but I've made no secret of the fact that I find a lot of wisdom in the Bible. So for those who have problems with that, too bad. The scripture was, wasn't it something that you must come to hate your parents, that Christ said you must come to hate your parents?
Let no man come to me without hating his mother, hating his father, hating his brother, hating his wife, hating his own self and his own life.
And I bet we could probably replace, when he said hating his own self, you could place that with hating his role.
Exactly. And this is red pill. This is definitely red pill, because he's saying, look, you've got to release this old stuff. You got to let it go, because it's not you. I'll never forget, my teacher used to look at me in the eye. He used to say, you are not you. And I'd go, oh. The purpose was to shake me up, to shake me and say, you dumbass. You're not what you think you are. Wake the fuck up. And that's kind of what we need to do with men sometimes, is to say, hey, buddy, Men are good, and so are you, but you got to wake up a little bit because this stuff is eating you alive. Oh.
Just like we tell men all the time, and I know the men in our audience have no problem at all with understanding the message when I say, you know, you're not supposed to be what this world stamps you out to be. You don't have to be any of this shit. You don't have to be chivalrous. You don't owe women a damn thing. You don't owe them an explanation for why you don't owe them anything. You just don't owe anybody anything because you're a man.
Yes.
And men in our audience have no problem hearing that message and internalizing it. The message about family of origin is very, very similar.
Yes, I was going to say that.
It's going in and finally looking, because look at it. We get raised in our families from the time we're born, and we treat everything we're told about ourselves as gospel. We can't help it. It's coming from our parents, and when you're tiny, your parents are gods. They are the unquestioned gods of the universe, and whatever they tell you must be true, and you internalize that stuff. Guess what? They lied to you. They may not have known they were lying. They have been just mistaken. They were lied to when they were kids. There's a million reasons for this, but the fact of the matter is that in a dysfunctional family, the message you get about who you are carries with you your whole life if you don't correct it.
Yes. That is correct. And it's sometimes a struggle to be able to, A, see that that's happening, and B, then let it go. And the good news is, guys, that there are a number of techniques out there now that are helpful in letting the stuff go that we didn't have 30, 40 years ago. You know, EMDR is one, eye movement desensitization reintegration, I think is what it stands for, EMDR. But there's all kinds of things that are out there that help us let the stuff go and release it and become free. We want to become free. You know, Paul, the other thing I was thinking about with the systems thing is that the role we play within our family is also, we're invested in that because our role helps stabilize that system. You know, so we have a vested interest in maintaining our own role, even if it's a scapegoat or the lost child or whatever it is. So that's another reason that that role kind of sticks with us, and we see ourselves as that rather than seeing ourselves as something very different. You know?
And it's also really important to know that there may be elements of your role, even stuff like scapegoat, that is useful.
Yes.
It isn't like you have to throw everything that you've ever known about yourself away, but I can tell you, as somebody who was a family scapegoat, that I now look back on that, a lot of it as career development. That it made me the MRA that I am today.
Yes.
And I'm thankful for that. But I do, the important point is that in every scapegoat, they are convinced that they're worthless, that they're terrible, that they're bad. That is the most destructive, damaging thing. And I remember the first time I even sought any kind of counseling, I was trying to figure out why I was such a bad kid. That was my whole point.
Right.
And I found out pretty quickly, there's more to the story than that.
Yes.
That I didn't know. But in getting past that rebellious side of myself, the willingness to stand up and point at the emperor and say that he has no clothes, that I developed as a child, who did that with his parents and his siblings and all that other stuff, that stuff has served me well. And I think it served the men's movement to have that controlled and harnessed in a way that's not self-deprecating and it's not self-punitive, but it's celebrated.
Yes.
So you don't have to give up everything that you were.
And a lot of times, like you said, these roles have some piece of us that's actual. And, you know, like the lost child is probably someone who's very introverted and quiet. And that's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with being introverted and quiet if that's who you are. You know, that's a good thing.
And if you're a lost child, you'll probably always be on some level more introverted, but being introverted is not a disease.
I've noticed that, being one myself. I kind of like it. Get the hell out of my space.
Yeah, believe it or not, I'm kind of introverted too, most of the time.
Yeah.
I like my solitude
Yeah,
quite a
indeed.
bit. But anyway, what I think, what I'm thinking is, how long have we been talking now, Tom?
I don't know, 30 minutes?
30 minutes or so? That sounds good. Because what I'd like to do next time is to talk more about um, what you can do, how to break out of these roles.
Yes,
And you know, some people do it with therapy, but I want to tell you, you don't have to do it with therapy.
exactly.
You can do it on your own. I think it's harder, and it's always helpful to have somebody in your life that understands what you're dealing with.
Yes,
You can use a sounding board, and I recommend that to anybody. But you don't necessarily have to pay somebody an hourly fee to do this. It can be
right.
convenient, and it can also be risky.
Yes,
Because there's plenty of therapists out there that'll try to send you right back into that role as hard and fast as they can because they haven't gotten out of their roles and they're not comfortable watching somebody else doing it. Just be advised of that.
indeed.
But I thought we'd take that up next time, Tom, and
Yeah,
start
maybe we can
talking.
talk a little bit about determining what's abuse and what's not. You know,
That would be a good place to
yeah,
start.
because that's kind of tied in with the roles and how to determine if it is or isn't abusive and how you can let it go.
And if you're going to
Really,
break out of those roles, you've got to be able to identify the abuse that was in your family.
yes, yes, yeah, and own it.
But mind you, this is not about crucifying your family. It's not about blaming mom
Exactly.
and dad for your problems. It's nothing like that at all. A lot of people take objection sometimes. Well, I don't want to go back and blame my parents for everything. Well, we're not talking about doing that.
Right.
We're talking about the reality that on one side of the coin, almost every parent, there are some exceptions that are just human garbage, but most all parents do the best they can
Given the givens.
given what they have to work with. They
Yes.
do the best. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that sometimes they do a shitty job. And it's okay to acknowledge that and still love your parents.
Yes. Yes. And really, the work is not blaming people. I mean, blaming people is the exact opposite of what you want. It's understanding what the hell happened. You just understand where you were in that mobile. What was my place? How can I leave that place now if I want to? You know, what were the other people's places? When you start to understand things, then you can let it go. Once you've kind of chewed it and digested it, you can let it go. Man, then you're free. Then you're red pill, bitch. Let it go.
And you can experience that freedom in how you relate to other people. I can tell you something real quick anecdotally here. There was and some of it still lingers. I pointed out in one of my videos that I thought that oh God, what's his name? I'm getting a blank. Our Canadian professor,
Oh, Peterson.
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
That I thought Jordan Peterson was a typical family hero. That he was a golden child. There was no doubt about it. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
And there was a period in my life long ago where I viewed golden boys and hero children with contempt. And as a family scapegoat, that's what you tend to do. It's like, you know, why does this person get all the accolades and
No
love and
shit.
appreciation?
That's right.
And I get told I'm a shit. Well,
Yep.
guess what? After I sorted through a lot of these issues and worked out and came on the other end of them, I started noticing something about some of the family heroes I used to have contempt for, was that they were just as trapped or even more trapped,
Yes.
you know, in a role.
Yes.
I talked to one man I'll never forget that was a real turning point. He was an endodontist that made a ton of money, had a massive practice. And I had a few drinks with him one night and just started talking. And the next thing I know, he was breaking down. You know what he wanted to do his whole life? Make furniture. He
Wow.
wanted to be a woodworker and work with
Yeah.
his hands.
Yeah.
But once he got started on the medical path, the family wasn't going to let him be anywhere else.
Right. Right.
And so he had lived his whole life performing like a trained SEAL
Yep.
for his family, unable to figure out a way out of it.
Yes.
Powerful, powerful stuff.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking about things like that and about what you can do to move from being in that role to finding out who you are and living that life. And I think that's as red pill as it gets.
Yeah, man. I agree.
Sounds good.
So we finished?
I think we are.
I think we're finished for tonight.
Until next time.
Until next time, men are good.
They are very good.
As are you.
Good night, everybody.
You all take care. We'll see you. Let's see if I can turn this thing off.
Turn the damn thing off, Golden.